Before we talk about your MACA talk and about those issues that you talked about this year, I want to give you a chance. Do you because this is Reef Beef, do you have a beef you want to beef about?
Give us a beef, brother, man.
Oh, about aquariums in general.
Yeah,
or
go
anything.
for it.
I'm a faculty member. I'm a faculty member. We just complain for a living, right?
We love it.
So I mean, that's just what we do, you know.
So what's a current aquarium world beef that you've got?
Oh, you know, I guess my biggest beef is just people's denialism when it comes to the realities of the situation that we're in. When it, you know, they think that they're going to save coral reefs by growing corals in their basement, or you know, I just, that whole argument to me is laughable. I mean, it's really cute that people think that they're going to be able to actually save coral reefs, you know, in their basement. Or I mean, and I just think that, to me, I look at the world and the utter hell that is coming down the pipeline for ecosystems, and I just don't know how people can come to that conclusion that they're actually going to make a difference with this. And it just, I think just that denialism just kind of perforates through the whole thing, that people just have a loss of reality. They don't look at where their animals are coming from, or what their actions, you know, really have meaning in doing, and they want to make things seem like, you know, they're better than they are for some particular purpose. You know, we're raising fish and we're going to save coral reefs by raising fish. You're not, right? You're not going to. It sounds great though. It sounds really good, and that's just always been something that has driven me crazy.
That's a fantastic beef. I had a different beef, but I'm going to riff on your beef.
Oh, sure.
My thing, people don't understand. People think that like spawning corals for a super coral, or using, you know, a warmer, a clade of symbiote in the coral, the Symbiodinium or Zooxanthellae, whatever you want to call it, to make that coral live better in hot conditions. Or to spawn corals that can live in more acidic waters. People think that that's great and that will save coral reefs. What people don't understand is that's because we've given up on
that's right. That's what
stopping climate change. We've given up. We're trying now to make, we're now trying to go, all our Oreos are on the floor and crumbles. What do we do with them now? We have no more Oreos. Let's sell crumbles.
I think we have to separate corals, and this is, and you're right. The problem that I have is that we've given up a lot of, like, actually stopping the train that's coming down the tracks, right? That's coming very fast, and that we'll probably won't get to see all the ramifications of that, but our children definitely will. And you know, so we kind of given up on that, but we also, people don't understand the reef part of it versus coral.
Yeah.
Right? And so, you know, these ecosystems are so complex, right? And that complexity is what makes them so valuable. That makes them really valuable. The fact that things are layered on top of things that are layered on top of things, and you know, you can't just save a coral or plant a coral and get everything to come back. I mean, you know, and I'm not a huge proponent, and I don't specialize in restoration, aquaculture, or any of that, but I think that it's important to do those things and try to save some ecosystems that we have through some restoration efforts. And if you look at the work that Seacor does and those things, it's really great. To me, it's telling people that we're going to save coral, because I think people need to hear that we're not. We're going to lose most all of them. And we might have a patch here and a patch there, and they'll be in our basements for sure. Right. And we'll have more in our basements than you will out on the reefs in you know, if things are continuing the direction they're going. And you know, when Ron Shimmick used to talk about this in the 90s at meetings, people thought he was crazy. Right. And it's been pretty obvious for a long time what's going to happen. And so, you know, it's not that these efforts aren't important, right? It's that these efforts, to me, feel like, you know, I saw something where they're actually taking a boat in the Great Barrier Reef and they're like spraying mist into the air to create clouds, or they're talking about, like, you know, sunscreens for coral. Like, it's just insane, when the actual problem that we need to address is the problem that is, it's very hard and complex to address carbon, but that if we don't deal with that, it's not going to change anything.
Yeah, and I mean, And in popular science, they're talking about putting arrays in space that would block sunbathing. And it's like,
I think we saw Total Recall. We saw this, right? We've seen the movie, right? We've seen this movie, right?
Go ahead. You're the guest.
No, I just don't know if like is science fiction drives reality or reality drives science fiction. And that's something I've always pondered for a long time. Like, do we just conjure up things in our imagination and make them work, or is it the other, or people who are writing science fiction seeing things way out in front of us and writing about it in really fun ways, and we read it and remember it.
Well, the one of the things that keeps me going is we're a really clever species. We really may clever ourselves out of this. We really may not, but we really may. The right carbon sequestering solution could come up, and we'd be in good shape. But besides that, my analogy that goes on what you're saying is, the solution to an orphanage on fire isn't to put orphans in various kinds of fireproof pajamas and throw them into the orphanage and see how they do. That's not the way to fix the problem. Put out the fire. And if we're not going to put up the fire, we're just going to have, orphans shrink wrapped in different kinds of plastic from heat.
Which, obviously we don't need to turn this into a political discussion, but it's just like, we can't change the speed of the cogs of capitalism. And another thing I was thinking a second ago too is when you look into the void and the void looks back at you, and it's like oh, if I make corals in my basement, I can put the reefs back. And it's like, I mean, you shouldn't think that because it's not true, but
I remember in 98 when the first bleaching event happened, and there was the Palawi and green Nephthyle, right? And we were going to put it back in Palau, right?
Yeah.
And that is so challenging to do right? Yeah. And zoos and aquariums particularly have worked to figure out how to put things back, right? And they have very sophisticated programs and stuff. And aquariums are starting to think about this with corals now, because they had literally the Florida Reef Track project where they're trying to get as many corals into Florida corals into public aquariums because disease is ravaging them. Right. And people are literally at their wits' end to figure out, what do we do here to save something that's out there?
And those all have to be biosecure. You can't take the Florida corals and put them in anything that's anywhere near Indo-Pacific coral tanks and ever think about putting them back out into the wild.
Yeah, and it's exactly right. So it's an enormous. The challenge there is massive, and I would love for somebody to play this in 10 or 15 years at a conference and be like, look how wrong he was.
Yeah,
right.
That would be awesome.
That would be great. I would be thrilled to death to watch that. That would be awesome. But I'm
Ruth. Why can't I remember Ruth's name?
Gates, visionary, absolute visionary. Right?
Yeah, and when she was saying, let's just put the Franken corals out, and people were like, but what could happen? She's like, it's too late to worry about what.
Corals might survive.
Yeah, it's too late to worry about what might happen. We just have to roll some dice.
Yeah, I've had a friend of mine who's a very serious scientist, similar things like this, that he's ideas that I don't want to mention to hobbyists because I'm afraid they might do it.
Yeah.
And because it is that bad. And I think that people need to understand. And that's really, I mean, if you think that's my Magnet Talk took that lens, Rich, and I try to take that lens of, it is that bad, whether you want to think about it or not, or maybe you have been corrupted by the money that has poured in to make you think it's not bad. I mean, I grew up in the heart of tobacco world in North Carolina, right? And I remember those hearings where those tobacco executives got in front of Congress and told people that smoking didn't cause cancer, right? And they had all those people bought for so long. They literally owned them with their money. And it seems eerily familiar. That's what's actually happening now. It's not really a political thing. It's a money thing. People are just been owned, right? And they've made decisions about things 20 years ago or 30 years ago, whether it's acid rain or, that was destroying the Appalachian Mountains because of, the amount of activity coming out of the Midwest or climate, whatever it is, that these decisions, the only one that really amazes me is the ozone layer. Like, we actually got that right.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know how we got it right. Like, but these are very complex geopolitical things where there's so much money involved, right? And so, that money is so corruptive. And you look back in time at like tobacco, and people are like, did they? You're like, oh, they knew that in the 50s or 60s that it was going to kill people. And so, I try to take the lens of it's that bad, right? So the environmental situation is not getting better. It's going to get worse. And you have those tanks in the background there. And will you be allowed to keep those into the future? Right. And that's really, and some people, and I'm aware that people interpret that two different ways, right? They interpret that of get your hands off my corals. You're not allowed to tell me what to do.
Freedoms.
Right. They're freedoms. And then also, wow, we must do something to save the natural environment because this is terrible. I mean, people have different perspectives they see that message from, but I think people need to understand that this thing is rolling down the road and it's coming. And if we don't have conversations around, how our value framework is going to change, right? Or how legislation is going that is on the books now, it's going to impact what people have and have been doing, whether they're caught in the middle of that or not. And the Tridacnid clams or the bang-eyed cardinals are just great examples of things that are coming down the pipe that I don't think people in the aquarium hobby side of it, people who just enjoy having tanks in their house, pay any attention to, right? They just enjoy having fish tanks, and so it's not talked about.
We live and die in the space of 100 years, and we have a hard time thinking past that, because if it doesn't affect us, we could give a shit less.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. That's part of the problem is our baseline, right? This is that term that colleges use, that your reference point, right, is set. And I mean, I saw this firsthand. When I first started here at Roger Williams, I took some students to the Bahamas with me, and we did a class, and we were on a liveaboard on Blackbeard cruises for a week. And I took a friend of mine from the aquarium who's a coral reef ecologist, and we were diving in the berries, and she was in tears, and I was underwater, and I was like, what's going on? She was like, they're all dead. Yeah. And the students were like, wow, that was great. and this seasoned ecologist was literally just devastated at the scape of macroalgae and just utter devastation of the palmata and the cervicornis that was around us was just all dead.
Meanwhile, right? Your phycologist was excited.
Yeah, the macroalgae people and the sponge people are going to win in the Caribbean, right? They're all sponges and macroalgae.
We had that a few years ago on a Sea Corps trip in the Bahamas, where we went to I forget the site, but it was where we're hopefully going to get spawn. And we came up, and some of the new grad students were like, "This is the best site we've ever been on." And I was like, "Well, shifting baselines is not so good." And Mitch Carl was there, and he goes, "This site sucks. Everything here sucks. You have no idea what you're talking about."
Yeah, it's exactly. But that's the perspective. If you go out on and take a dive tour boat or something like that and be a tourist, like occasionally, and I would go out and on a dive when I'm in someplace, I'll just go out with other divers and be a tourist for a half a day or something. And the perspective of people is based on what they've seen. And so the people who have been in the water 30 years or something like that,
just going like
pretty
this.
Humbled by what they're watching. If they've been studying this since the 70s or 80s, Charlie Vernon or somebody, these people are in states of depression essentially because they have seen this happen. And it's happened so fast that normally you would never be able to see it in your lifetime, right? Normally we would degrade an ecosystem over hundreds of years and we wouldn't know what was there. And so it's that baseline in reference of people's knowledge is a real barrier to be able to make some radical changes in lifestyle to be able to move the ship. And we only have to get 7 billion people to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And COVID has been this really great test for that. So.
Yep.